All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. As you can see, I am not home, but that will not stop us because we have Wheel of Time to talk about.
Yes.
Good Wheel of Time.
Shit. Sorry. Oh, I dropped my harmonica. Where'd my Wheel of Time book go? Oh, right in front of me. There we go. All right. Wheel of Time.
All right, let's get into it because I think we have like 6 chapters to cover that we want to cover here. Uh, yeah, no, more than that. We're on chapter 18 and I want to stop at chapter 26. So let's see if we can get through that.
Crap. I was ahead. I started reading a little bit and I was on 19, 18. Okay. So you're going to have to catch me up on it on 18.
yeah, there's not a ton that happens here. I mean, it's important stuff and it's interesting, but it's Leandrin and her group of Black Ajah. And then this is where Moghedian shows up to take over the group.
Oh, yes. I
Uh,
remember this.
and this is one of our minor complaints is we felt like this is a place where Jordan's kind of lacking in, he could have done some more of these uh smaller character points of view to really kind of flesh these things out more, not just these storylines but these characters, especially the Forsaken. Now you do get a lot of Moghedian going forward. I mean, I think by the end of it, she may be more fleshed out than Lanfear is because of how much screen time she
Yeah.
gets.
I was just going to make that comment before you did because she's kind of, when you hear the descriptions of the Forsaken, kind of put out as a nothing burger, and we actually get more in depth with her in this story
Yeah.
than almost all of them, I would say.
Yeah. I think so.
Now there are some logistical reasons for that
Yeah.
because she ends up just being in the mix for a while, but
Mhm.
at the same time, when you're talking points of view, he could have given points of view with any of the Forsaken at any time.
Yeah.
And the only one I understand, and I won't go into why because of spoilers, is the only one I understand he doesn't give you much of is Demandred. But the other ones he could have given us a lot of point of view anytime without giving away story.
Yeah, and I feel with Demandred, it it works in the totality because he's trying to leave Demandred a mystery. He's trying to make that a bit of a mystery box. Um, but in the next book, in Lord of Chaos, we do get an interesting chunk of Demandred to let us know kind of what he's all about and who he is. Um, and then just kind of tease us for, okay, but where is he and what's he doing? Um, with Moghedian, I think the main thing that jumps out at me here is I like the bad guy point of view because Leandrin is a piece of work. Um, as we've said, she's the only good thing in the Wheel of Time series on Prime. Um, and this really brings it home here of how arrogant, how arrogantly evil she is. That the people beneath her are just bugs,
Mm-hmm.
basically. And so it's amusing then when she runs headlong into Moghedian, who feels the same way about her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's there's always someone bigger and stronger. But the other interesting thing is that, as you point out, up until this point, and from the perspective of the other Forsaken, Moghedian isn't really powerful because she's a schemer and she stays in the shadows, right? But you see the way she just manhandles not just Leandrin, but then you get from the description of how when she's looking at the others and sees the small tells, like the strain around their eyes or how they're kind of clenching their jaw, that they're under stress, they're under strain. That Moghedian has handled all of these Aes Sedai with relative ease, and she's considered the least powerful of the Forsaken. And it is in large part not a matter of strength, it is a matter of skill, that
Mhm.
she's so quick
Well,
and so
it's that misconception of power as in strength in the power, or
mm,
power is in what you are capable of, period, and stop, and how you get to where you are. Because remember, she's considered the weakest of the Forsaken, but she's also one of the Forsaken, which makes her one of the 13 most powerful people of the baddies in the Age of Legends, which is already more powerful than what we have
mhm.
in this world here.
Yeah, and as we'll find out later, incredibly long lived, and thus it incredibly experienced. And um I do like it when you get Age of Legends people's points of view and they're surprised at something because the primitives have figured something out that they didn't or hadn't even considered. And um I do like that because that is the case. I come from a history background, so there are surprising things when it comes to more primitive civilizations and what they came up with. But at the same, as we've talked about, the glimpses you get of the Age of Legends, it's practically sci-fi with how advanced they were in in their use of the power, in manipulating the power to do all sorts of things. And this chapter really demonstrates that she's so much skilled, so much more skilled than the others, that she just slaps them down. Um, and then it
Well, and
ends.
also add to that her being the weakest of the Forsaken is still as strong as the strongest
Mhm.
known at this point channeler in this age.
Mhm. And then Moghedian lays out. She's looking for Nynaeve, and she's going to have Leandrin and some of the others help her. And she knows she has a good idea of where they are or where they last were. So she mentions seeing the town perhaps 60 miles east of here, and so she's able to keep tabs on them somehow. Um, so nice little bit of ominous foreboding there. Okay, and then the next chapter, and this is something I mentioned when we got Gareth Bryan, is I wish he would have done this more later when he starts to bring in new people. Is no, why not just use some of the other characters you've already established? And there might not be much to those characters, but we've seen them, we've heard their names before. We've met Morgase, and now she's about to start having a much more prominent storyline, and you're going to get her points of view. Um, and so this is the start of her quest as she kind of wakes up and goes off. Um, the the one thing I don't like about this chapter, but I think you can rationalize it, is how uh, adamant she is that nothing is wrong, that she's just been acting stupidly, that she doesn't see that these uh, strange gaps in her memory where she can just vaguely remember things happening, and it's like an out of body experience. She doesn't even remember it as like being her. Some of the things that Lord Gabriel has had her do,
Mm-hmm.
right, to completely drive everyone away who's loyal to her.
Well, this is where it's left slightly vague because that's how fantasy works. But when we just brought up the advancement of the Age of Legends, so think of everything we know technologically, plus add magic, and then add some advancement beyond that because it's even further in the future. Uh, if someone had the knowledge of how, say, uh, a channeler was an an extremely gifted neuroscientist that studied brain scans his entire life. And he lived 300 years to study these brain scans. And he's still young and has a power to manipulate someone's synapses the way he wants to. Well, we've already had the free will discussion that just your past will create these gaps. Now imagine someone who's got that knowledge plus a power to manipulate it.
Oh
And
yeah, we're just beginning to really see what compulsion can do, and we get it even more later. So it's not that he was able to do this, it's that it never even occurs to her that there's something fishy here, that this isn't just normal game of houses stuff. Now,
and I actually like this better than the way it's typically done in fantasy, where it's basically like hypnosis, and then when the spell is off, you're completely back to where you were, wondering what happened. Whereas here, it's a lingering effect, which is actually how the brain would work. So if you were manipulated in a way to change your behavior, that's not going to go away overnight, because your body's actually going to adapt towards that behavior, just like with exercise. So the fact that it doesn't just it fades away over time when you start acting normally, because then you start redirecting those adaptations as well. So it's actually done better in the Wheel of Time than I think in most other fantasy, because that's actually how the brain would work. It's
well,
not something that just goes away.
and I do like the way Jordan lays out the thought process and how Morgase is able to think through, able to deduce and think past the compulsion. So she's got all these, directives and memories and things implanted on her, which I guess we have seen it a fair bit, because I forgot, we see it with Moghedian and Nynaeve and Elaine, and we see the way Nynaeve is able to break past it.
Well, and that's that again, I don't think Jordan knew this, but he understood it intuitively, to some degree. It's just like Arnold with bodybuilding. Yeah, he got so many things right, and then you ask him why, and he was completely wrong. I think Jordan understood that this concept existed. We have different memory centers in the brain. We have short-term memory centers, we have long-term memory centers, but those are tied, some of those are tied to emotions. So the synapses connect to your amygdala versus the synapses connecting to your hippocampus, or whatever the different centers of your brain, and they all have a purpose. The problem is they don't always communicate. And so someone with trauma at 5 years old can have that lingering underneath the surface and be reacting at 25 years old without knowing why they're reacting that way. And it has to do with that center in their memory. And then there's something lingering there that says, there's something weird that's making me do this. I know I'm doing something wrong here.
That's a good point. I wasn't even thinking about that with where I was going, but do we know who Lord Gabriel is? Yeah, we do, because we had the meeting of the Forsaken in the prologue. So, and we know Ravine's personality, that he is a lecherous man whore. And that's part of his power play too, is it's not just it's not just the physical, but there's a little bit of Grendel in him, of his conquests also need to be women of power, not just beautiful women. And
also so, he gets a little bit of something out of women who originally don't want him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a little bit of Deshaun Watson in that case.
Yikes.
The worst thing you could say to him in the beginning is no, because then he'll get it any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and so he's clearly playing on her, the lizard brain, the passion side of Morgase.
Playing on hers. I was going to say he's much too calculated to say
that. No. So that's what I thought of when you were talking about the different parts of the brain, is because the way she breaks through is with the rational, logical taking it step by step, thinking through, well, this means this, which must mean this, which leads me to this. And, holy crap, I've let Lord Gabriel basically, stage a coup right under my nose. So that's how she breaks through, is because he's been playing on that passion and that emotion, and he's been cranking that up so that and you still see a little bit of that with her instinct to not want to go to Gareth Bryan for help. And I think the reason she's still so viciously adamant of no Aes Sedai is that to me was the one kind of, I don't know about this, Jordan, but now that I talk about it out loud, I think she was already thinking about that because her daughter disappeared. So both the mother and the politician, this is the daughter heir, were freaked the heck out. And that's what Gabriel is playing on, is that emotion, that passion, and he's just cranked it up to 11. So that part makes a lot of sense, that would stick more because that was already there.
Yeah, and again, I'm just imagining this advanced society where they knew so much about the human brain. I mean, just take things we know now. Like there's a part of the hypothalamus that if you stimulate it just a little bit, it makes the rat super horny. You listened to this podcast with me, was Andrew Huberman, but then you stimulate that exact same spot a lot, they get murderous. And so someone who understands that and then has this power to basically innervate someone's brain and stimulate these spots, you can do whatever you want with somebody, because you just nudge it. You just give it a little pop.
And I think just leave it there, because actually we can come back to this later when we actually see the physical mechanism of how compulsion works, which I think is several books down the road, when we see Nynaeve learning how it works. And I'll just leave it at that.
That's a good point, because I forgot about that part. But
so that makes a lot of sense with what you're talking about. All right, and so it ends with good old Basil Gill and Lamb Gwyn.
Don't forget Talonvor. Talonvor is one of the unsung heroes of this whole thing.
Yeah, and he brings him back into it.
I think he gets a little Gawain-ish, but then he doesn't go over the top.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good way to think of him, of what Gawain could have been, or maybe should have been, or at least maybe a little bit more like that. Even though he is a young guy, Gawain is a younger guy. He's still, this is more what we, when we first meet him, this is more of what we thought he would be. And then you get a little snippet here at the end where we are reintroduced to Padan Fain and Alviren. I like the way Fain is able to play Alviren here. That he knows enough about how the dark works, and he knows enough about manipulation that he's able to just with a few slight cues figure out how to play her to get himself out of here.
One thing I would have liked to see Jordan do here is interchange using the name Fain and Mordeth, because Padan Fain doesn't know how to manipulate like that. Now he was a salesman, but he couldn't play an Aes Sedai. But Mordeth could.
And I really think by this point he's already starting to blur. That I thought we had already.
Well, he was already blurring when he killed that Madral in book 2.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought that when we got some of his points of view earlier, he was already talking about being confused about who he was, because he wasn't even in his own mind, he wasn't just Fane anymore.
Mm-hmm.
All right, then we get back to Rand and Matt and Egwene and kind of the main storyline here, and this is the initial build up to the big fighting that's going to happen. We get some action scenes here, which is cool. But then we also get kind of the scheming. We get some interesting Aiel things, some Aiel society stuff here in these chapters. And then we get some more of Egwene's personality, some things that jumped out at me when I was going back over this. Now, I usually skim these chapters to get ready before we record, and I had a hard time not just reading these word for word like another reread, because this is the stuff where we've talked about before, that we weren't wild about this when we first read it, because there is something of a downer coming after the Shadow Rising and Dragon Reborn, which were both just so phenomenal start to finish. And then you really get to liking Perrin. You know, he becomes a fan favorite by the end of the Shadow Rising, and he's not here. I mean, I don't remember where it was, but it may have been somewhere around this point where I said, hold on a second, flip. You're just, flipping through to each chapter to see whose point of view it is, and shouting at the wall, there's no Perrin in here.
Mm-hmm.
Which then a couple more books down the road, you do that again for another character that made everybody mad. I mean, it makes sense why he's not here, but I feel like he could have found a little something to kind of flesh some stuff out and give us some more. But it's still good stuff. And this is, where the reread part of it comes through, and this book starts to grow on you.
Yeah, and it's not the lack of Perrin that made me blah about this book, because I love Matt and he's a big part of this book.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, it's almost a first world problem that we're bitching and moaning that this should have been included when we already have 14 books at about 1,000 pages each. It's at one point you're like, well, what's the difference? Because 30 pages here or 100 pages there, it would have been still 14 books at about 1,000 pages. But at the same time, we got lots of material. Now, to maybe one of Scott's points, we could have nixed a couple secondary characters that turned out to be nothing burgers, but
or made some of these secondary characters who were a little bit bigger, some people we'd already met, consolidated some characters, right? But it just goes to show, really, I think, how good the series is, because I mean, contrast it with, I mean, just the constant complaints about the Prime series, and we had real substantive complaints of, these characters are shallow and boring. This, we're kind of repeating some of the same threads. This doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't look good. I mean, all of our complaints were very substantive. It wasn't just nerd mad. It's not like the source material. No, it just was objectively not good. Whereas this, all of our complaints are nitpicking. It's that this thing could have been better. This thing could have been a little better. I don't know that we have any complaints that are this was just bad. This even in part, it's hard to think of a part that was that wasn't good, as opposed to just that could have been better.
Well, the sad thing is I could think of parts that weren't very good, but most of them are Sanderson parts.
Well, yeah, I wasn't going to go there yet.
Yeah, there's nothing we can do about that, though. It's this is part of life.
It was probably the best solution to a very sad and bad situation. All right, so into the substance of it. I like we've gotten a lot of Moraine's point of view and why she's doing what she's doing, and then to see it from Rand's perspective is just kind of sad that he doesn't get it. where Moraine sounds like resigned. Like he's starting to notice that she's a little out of character. Um, so yeah, at the bottom of 372, where
Mhm.
she's lecturing him, trying to teach him all she can about Karaheen. Are you listening to me? Maureen said suddenly, raining her white mirror closer. You must. She took a deep breath. Please, Rand, there is so much that I must tell you, so much that you need to know. The hint of pleading in her tone made him glance at her. He could remember when he had been overawed by her presence. Now she seemed quite small for.
Hey, hey, pause, pause. Did you mute yourself on accident? Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can now, but
That was weird.
after in awe at her presence, you just went completely silent.
I think the computer decided to change change my settings randomly, but it seems to be working now. You can hear me all right?
I can hear you all right. Yes.
All right. So anyway, uh yeah, I mean to keep you close from now on is kind of um the key line there, and then her response of course, she sighed, as you wish, we have plenty of time yet. And of course, we know that she knows that no, she doesn't.
Well, this is a tough one because in her defense, there's so much to teach him about the game of houses because it's something she learned over a lifetime. In his defense, there's no way you can learn all about the game of houses in one lecture. And it's, yeah, she's got to consolidate. She has to understand. First of all, would you say 21 years old? Is that what
Yeah,
we came up with?
yeah, that's what we came up with when she was talking about how uh yeah, because she said that it was almost 21 years to the day or something like that, and one of her.
And he was born that day.
And he was,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. It was when
So
Egwene
all the
told her
boys are
that
gonna about
Saban
to be
was dead.
21 because they were all like a week from each other or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can all
Um,
legally drink. All right. Matt's been doing it this whole series already.
yeah, well, um, I had my first drinks well before my legal age, but it was
Well,
because
we're also in a day and age in this that was probably 15 when they could do that.
it, exactly because, you know, like me is I was with my dad. We were in Europe with a culture that is much more alcohol tolerant, and it was, yeah, go ahead. You can try this wine, see what you think of it. You can try this beer, see what you think of it. And I was with him, so I was only having one, you know, and that was that.
Well, Ben had his first drink at 3-ish. That
What
was
did
an
he just
accident.
did he just find a glass sitting somewhere and say, "Oh,
Yeah, no, I was watching the game and I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I hear, and I turned around and was like, that was full. And he looks up at me and goes, daddy.
did he get sick or anything?"
No, I watched him. I followed him around. I didn't let him go to sleep. But yeah, that was one of my bourbon cokes
Wow.
that I'd watch a second half of a Texans game with because that's how we roll. And but
You
then we
gotta do
started
this
coming back.
year.
It was when we were actually starting to get decent with Kubiak, and so I was into the game, and I just heard, oh shit,
Yep. All right. And then we get some gross stuff that happens.
gross stuff. Wait, I didn't read that
The
far ahead.
they get to the town at the front of the Shanghai Pass, and the uh grisly message that Couladin had left for him
Mm-hmm.
with the bodies hanging from the wall. Um and like Maru, that is a very French looking word, so I have no idea how to say that.
Wait, where's
But
it
so
at?
at the bottom of 373, um where he has this instinctive thought that comes from Luz Theron.
Maru.
Yeah. Um, something interesting though is Jordan doesn't tell us that it's not his voice. So it almost seems to me like he had that thought as himself, as opposed to it being Luz Theron's voice, which we've seen now happen before.
Mm-hmm.
But in this instance, it's like the memory is his. It sure seems to me, because he tried to shake the thought away, but in his head he could see the great city after it was retaken. Bad stuff, bad stuff. Very medieval, and he's when it's Luz Theron's voice, it's more explicit that he's trying to shut out the voice.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that interesting. But he does a very good sympathetic, empathetic job here of explaining a lot of why Rand is going to start acting the way he acts, and some of what he's already started acting. He knew whose memory it had to be, though he had not discussed it with Moraine. I am Rand al'Thor. Luz Theron Telamon is dead 3,000 years. I am myself. That was one battle he meant to win. If he did have to die at Shao Ghul, he would die as himself. He made himself think of something else. So it's not just that, holy crap, I've got a dead man's voice in my head. I've got a dead man's memories in my head. Even though this is a society where reincarnation is a given to these people, but it's one thing to know or believe that you had a past life. It's another thing to think that that personality, that person who is still a separate person so far as you're concerned, would somehow take over, and thus you would, in a sense, die, because your personality would be gone. Your thoughts and thought process would be gone. So it's not just the crazy of there are voices in my head. It's I'm going to lose myself.
Which is funny because, again, this is where Jordan hit it on the head with neurobiology, because if you were to have something taking over your brain, it would start with a memory center. And let's connect this to our world of dreams talk. So much of our dreams are these little snippets of our memory combined with emotion without a cognitive block. And so if this is starting to sneak in, it would be first in the form of memories. Are you there? Hello? Are you frozen? Or are you thinking? Hello, hello, hello. I think Heath is frozen. Let me text him real quick. And now he's gone. Well, shit. Hopefully he comes back soon. If not, I will pause it and we'll try to get him back. Okay, so his internet dropped. He's in a hotel, everybody. So his internet dropped and he's trying to get it back. So in that case, I'm going to pause it, take a bathroom break, and hopefully everything is back in order. Okay, so we had a little hiccup there. Apparently, doing it through the browser gives you a 40-minute limit.
Sure looks that
So
way.
I'll have to clip these together. So it might be tomorrow before these are out, just because I have to do the video editing. But
All right. Do you remember what the heck you were talking about?
yeah, I was talking about Jordan getting it right
Oh,
with
the reincarnation. Yeah.
yeah, because if you were to have this connection to somebody that was a past life, it would bubble up first through the memories. Especially since we bring into account the world of dreams. And when you dream, basically your prefrontal cortex turns off because it's replenishing sugars for the day, so it has energy. But your brain, you have the sleep cycles, right? So you
Yeah.
have your deep sleep, you have your light sleep, and you have your REM sleep. Well, REM sleep is when you dream. REM sleep is also when your prefrontal cortex is completely off for the most part, because it's replenishing energy. And the reason we have these cycles is, well, your brain can't turn off or you die, right? So you go through these cycles so different parts of your brain can turn off and replenish energy, while the other parts are basically sequencing the events of the day or of your mind. And dreams are a mysterious one because they seem to be very random. And sometimes you have a dream and it's your brain processing stuff, and you're like, oh my god, how fucked up am I? uh, so
Yeah. Yeah. Just the other, I don't even, and it fades so fast too, because you remember the weirdness and you don't remember what was going on. I remember waking up the other day going, what the heck was that? And and then very quickly I couldn't even remember what the hecking.
yeah. Maybe in spoilers we'll go through dreams a little bit more because I got some funny ones. But I have a reoccurring dream and it makes sense. Uh, but that's what it is. Your prefrontal cortex is off, which is the part of your brain that makes sense of the world from your experiences. So it's also the stopgap. So you have an emotional response, but your PFC says, don't do that. Like you walk by somebody and you want to punch them. You don't know why. You don't, it just it's just this random feeling that you want to punch them. And it's your PFC that says, no, punching people randomly is bad. Right. So take that away and then add memories, the connection between your emotional center and your memory centers. And that's where dreams come from, basically, the poor man's version of it right there. So combine memories with emotions and take away rationality, and then you have dreams. And so it just makes perfect sense that if there is a connection, is this metaphysical connection between the dream world and the physical world, that the first place for something from a past life to bubble up would be in your memories.
That segues nicely into kind of the next thing about this chapter that really jumps out, which is, and we're still from Rand's point of view, but now he's noticing Matt's different, because Matt's not just staring at the town, he's studying the town.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes comments about having sentries up, and how did the Aiel sneak in and take you by surprise so easily. And and the studying part, because Matt's still Matt in a lot of ways, but he doesn't really strike you as a studier early on. And so this is going to come as something of a surprise to Rand.
Well, Matt, it reminds me of my Uncle Tom, because he was in all ways, shapes, and forms a rebel, but he was also a carpenter.
What was he Sawan's uncle that she's talking about when she talks to Matt after he gets healed by the dagger?
Yeah, he would have been that guy. And he's my late Uncle Tom. He rode hard, we'll say, and died an early death, probably because of that. But he was also super compassionate, taking care of people all the time. But from this perspective, though, he was an amazing carpenter and foreman. And when he would walk into a room, he was this normal, crazy self. But if there was a piece of woodwork that was artistic, or like an armoire that he would just sit there and he would twirl his beard and just stare at it. And he would kind of get lost in it for a few minutes or so. And that's kind of the way Matt is right here.
Yeah. And that is not normal so far as Rand is concerned. So
Yeah, except you probably would have seen it with Matt if you were paying attention earlier in life, because I bet you he would have been the same way when he saw a good horse.
That's a good point. And we do get that
Because
later when we
he
start to
got
get more
that
into that.
knowledge from his father. He was brought up that way, and his father was a horse trader, and he understood that, and he got a lot of those skills from him. So unconsciously, he probably would have gone into that state.
Yeah.
In more of a yeoman's kind of way than battlefields and
we get that. We actually do get that in his fight scenes. That when he's fighting Gawain and Galad, and then here a little bit when he fights the Madral, he's very analytical, but he thinks very quickly. He's very instinctual as well. So he is very purposeful. You know, when he's watching the swordsmen, the warders to be practicing in the White Tower, you know, he's thinking these things through. He's studying there. It's just, you know, doesn't seem like it because he's also juggling 3 rocks in one hand.
Yeah. Well, and this is why I think I made the comment before that I believe Matt is probably the most intelligent character in the whole series, because he just processes information so quickly that it's almost effortless, that he doesn't put any effort into it. He has very little ability to put effort in.
And that's what makes him also the comedic relief of the series, because he's so flippant, because things are so easy for him that he can be flippant and sarcastic, because just do this thing. Yeah, I did it. Okay, there you go. So something else that I'm curious if you have thoughts on this, that there's an interesting kind of interplay here when the Aiel show up, and they scare the bejesus out of the survivors from the town, who then go running off or just faint. And the Aiel, they're not being cruel. They're not. It's not exactly like holding a grudge. They just don't care, because these are tree killers. It's just no, they're tree killers. They are what they are, because the Aiel, exactly. The Aiel are very black and white. And they sometimes don't seem that way, and then we get more of that here at the end of this chapter, when Rand is going to bed and he's talking to Aviendha about the marriage ceremony for Bael and Miranda. No, Melaine. Yeah. I'm merging 2 names there in my head. So Bael and Moraine, and all the complicated stuff just for this one small thing about this other smaller thing, where Aviendha is going through this list of, if she would have chosen these kinds of flowers for this bridal wreath, it would mean this, or these, it would mean this, or these, it would mean this. And that's just for the bridal wreath. So it's just a small part of this other relatively small thing. But within all of those details and complications, they're very black and white. And yet, and this is why I don't want to get too political in our Wheel of Time podcast, but when America gets dark, it gets really dark. When we have committed atrocities in our past, it has been really bad. You know, the most obvious example is Germany. You look at Germany before World War I, and it is the pinnacle of the world, culturally, architecturally, music, science, industry. That is, Berlin is where you went, you know, to be at the it place. And then all of a sudden, just a couple generations later, they are killing people literally on an industrial scale. So when that switch flips, it flips, and it's nasty. So you see it on the one side, the switch is over here with Ruark and the others of just, they're tree killers. This is and Avienda explaining these things. No, this is just how it is. This is the way it is. And then it flips the other way, and you start seeing what Couladin and that clan and the people have joined him are doing. Of that, it's supposed to be this way. This is what Guy Shane are, but then all of a sudden, that switch has been flipped, and these people are just cattle.
That's crowds for you, man. It's you're going to have a percentage of a culture that is going to see the truth and overreact one way, overreact the other, and then the middle ground. And that's what we see. We have Couladin's crew, which is overreacting in the denial. We have the what were they called that left to become Gaishan, but they're not.
Oh, the people that they're capturing.
No,
they're calling them Gaishan, but
no, the ones that just left. I'm talking about Aiel.
Oh,
the ones that called themselves Gaishan because they're trying to be
I
the
can't remember what
original.
they call that, because the word that keeps popping in my head is brotherless, but those are the people that have forsaken that, and that's later.
Those are the people that left their clan to go to Couladin, are the brotherless.
No, they're called something else. I think the brotherless are the ones that leave their society and their clan and like pledge themselves to the Karakan. They pledge themselves to Rand al'Thor.
I thought it was the other way around, because
is it?
Yeah, spoilers if I say why, because it has to. Yeah.
Well, the point being, there are those.
There's the ones that just drop the spear, basically. So that's one extreme. There's Couladin and his crew. That's another extreme.
Yeah, I can't remember what they call those people, but they call it the bleakness, when they just throw their spears down and leave. And some of them are joining the Tinkers, who they used to despise.
So again, you got the extreme on one end, you got Couladin extreme on the other, and then you've got the people who kind of accept the truth begrudgingly, but they still have their culture, and they don't want to abandon everything. It's like, how can we make our culture work with this new truth we found? And that's pretty normal human behavior right there. You're going to have a percentage this way, a percentage that way, and a percentage in the middle.
But I also feel like there's something to a mind that is already conditioned to look at so much of the world as black and white, that it might be difficult to flip the switch the other way. But once you do, everything's still black and white.
Well, I still like to look at it as a cultural thing, because things that are black and white are based on that. When we get past the things that just make us normal humans, because you can go to the other side of the spine of the world, and marrying two women would be just considered horrendous, right? Which is we see this when they witness this, and Egwene and Rand and everybody's like, oh my God, what's going on here? But it's normal for Aiel. In fact, it's kind of like the courting ritual is reversed for the Aiel. And so black and white, you just marry, you find your one and only, and you get married, and you have a farm and kids and do your thing. Black and white thinking in that respect. Now the Aiel have their own black and white thinking, and I think that's the cultural.
Well, one of my favorite parts of this section is when they're talking about the marriage ceremony, and part of it is he has to fight his way. After the vows are said, he has to fight his way to get to her, and she tries to fight him off, and he only subdues her because his current wife punches his brand new wife in the short ribs so that she'll stop struggling and he can carry her off. So there's differences for you.
That would be kind of fun. I don't know.
I just join an Irish family, and then you'll have a fight at the wedding, probably for different reasons, but All right.
What'd she just say?
I don't know. Waifu's not allowed to talk on the podcast. What are you saying?
And I'm not punching anyone for you.
All right. She's not punching anyone for me. All right. Well,
Well,
that's sad. It's
she would
fine.
probably punch me. I don't think she would.
Yeah, but she wouldn't do it for me. She'd do it because you said or did something that upset her, and or that you shouldn't have done, or
Or
that
that
she
I
told you
exist.
not to do, or no, it's not
I've
that.
won carryover. I don't think she liked me in the beginning.
Oh,
I
probably
don't
not.
know. Maybe not. I don't know.
All right, now I'm trying to remember what the next chapter. Um, I think I rushed forward a little bit. The talking about the wedding was in the next chapter.
Oh, but by the title of the chapter, this is an important part.
Mhm. So this is another thing that jumped out at me when I was going through is because, as I've said, I've been kind of keeping an eye on Avienda and Rand's interactions, and you do see some. Since we're getting it from Rand's point of view, that he's definitely got those feelings, but he's reflexively rejecting them. Because as you just pointed out, he's from the other side of the spine of the world where they don't do that. And so he's already in his own mind pledged himself to Elaine, so he can't be interested in another woman. But he's got regard for her, he's got compassion for her, he's a little bit protective, and as we see when he keeps thinking about that necklace that she's wearing, he's got jealousy about her, that that he doesn't have for Egwene when they practically grew up being expected to marry each other one day. But when he put that aside and realized that those feelings were gone, and their relationship wasn't going to be what they thought it would be when they were young, those feelings are gone, and he doesn't think of her that way.
Are we gonna get to the finale with Rand and Avienda?
No, that comes later because it breaks and
Giggity.
goes to
No, because
Yeah.
there's a quote by Avienda here on page 383 that is a little bit of confession through projection.
but where is it?
You're on the paperback 383, the third paragraph down. Men always believe they are in control of everything around them. When they find out they are not, they think they have failed instead of learning a simple truth women already know.
Mhm.
But the whole point of the blade is exactly that she's living the life she's lecturing there.
Yes, that she's just about to do that herself. This is right before she gives him the blade. And again, stupid modern clickbait jerks, and they're writing about Jordan. This is why the gender roles are so appealing to men and women, because he just kind of is telling it like he is, and he's not saying that one side or the other is right or wrong or better or worse. He's just saying this is how they think, and this is how they think about each other. All right. I like the interaction with him and Asmodean, whatever. I don't remember.
Asmodean is what I would say. Again, my pronunciation manual is eaten from my book. So
Well, keep the new one away from him.
oh, that gate locks the office off. And I only let him in when I'm here, so he's right by my side. But
Um,
he ate the couch while we were gone this weekend. So
how did he eat a whole couch?
a corner off the couch. It's
I could believe he ate a whole couch. Um. Oh yeah, and the part I was talking about him with concern and regard for her, he freaks out kind of seeing her with the snake that she'd stabbed. Which I hate that part because I hate snakes. Any thoughts on the sword itself and the her giving the sword?
no, it's more the stuff that happens after and the
Mhm.
significance of the sword.
Yeah.
Uh,
I do think it's cool of what the sword is, where it came from, and the kind of the backstory. I love that kind of fantasy dorky stuff of here's this famous sword, and it follows this circuitous route to get to Rand here. And then we get the fun talk about the marriage ceremony, and then we get to chapter 22. Oh no, a Trolloc skull and fist and trident, which are clans, and I don't remember which ones. I do think it's cool that Trollocs have clans and they have scary symbols. So we switch to Matt's point of view. So I don't remember who I was listening to last week that was talking about the Rings of Power and Wheel of Time, that when the edict came from Sith Lord Bezos of, I want a Game of Thrones, make a Game of Thrones for Prime Video. When they jettisoned Conan the Barbarian, which was stupid and perfect for your own Game of Thrones, the decision was made to make two because they bought the rights to the appendices of The Lord of the Rings, and they had acquired the rights to Wheel of Time. So supposedly, The Lord of the Rings was supposed to be the more family-friendly Game of Thrones because it's Lord of the Rings, it's The Hobbit, it's The Fellowship, it's already established that even though those are owned by Warner Brothers, it is a well-established brand that is family-friendly, that parents did take their kids to see. And so they would, families would sit around and watch this. All right. Well, that makes sense until you see some of the ridiculous scenes from Rings of Power where blood is literally splashing onto the camera, which is dorky as well as not family friendly. And
well, it's like 300 style quiche, which was good in that movie because it had that Sin City vibe.
It was so stylized. Yeah. This is Rings of Power.
Sin City was one of the better movies of the last 20 years, I think.
Yeah. There was a second one that was good too. That's better than I thought it would be because it didn't do well. And I finally got around to seeing it and said, oh no, man, that was good. Anyway, the point of this was that Wheel of Time was supposed to be the more mature Game of Thrones, with the Lord of the Rings being the more family friendly one. And it wasn't even remotely. I mean, you had a little bit of boobies in the sauna scene with Moraine when the blue Ajah leader comes to talk to her. Okay. I mean, like just barely. That's like when, we were kids watching the scrambled Cinemax channel trying to pause it.
Oh, you get Land's butt. Weren't you turned on by Land's butt?
You get Land's butt. Yeah. Yeah. And the action was kind of, it wasn't very gory. It was so obviously CG'd and kind of stock and corny. And yet, man, if you wanted to do Wheel of Time, if you wanted to do your own Game of Thrones and you're too stupid to hold on to Conan, then man, this is a perfect series for it. Especially when we get to this stuff. People are naked all the freaking time in this book, especially when we get to the IEL.
He opened one eye and glanced back at her, kneeling astride his hips, i.e., she's in cowgirl.
Well, he's on his back while she's massaging him. But yeah, they are both very naked.
Yeah.
And then when the bird calls come, he's scrambling to put on pants because, I don't want the boys flopping around while there are thorn bushes out there and I'm in the middle of fighting.
And
she doesn't
and that's
care.
the thing, you're like, oh, you need to react. It's like, we're very vulnerable in a certain spot. And
she just wraps the shufa around her head, grabs her weapons and goes.
Yeah.
You got, not only do you have the sexy massage time nakedness, but you've got a fight scene while there's nakedness.
There's a reason we wear jock straps in sports.
Oh yeah.
It can become a hindrance in your performance. We should say.
Yep. Yeah. And then you've got the Game of Thrones gore with the bodies hanging from the walls, and it's going to be worse when they get out of the past and there are people impaled Vlad style on the other side of the Zhengai Pass. And then here you've got a fight scene, with gory goodness of Matt taking down Trollocs. And then I've said this before, it's worth reiterating that Matt's awesomeness is set up and it's built up, and now I feel this is kind of the culmination of Jordan letting he's a bad dude. We've built him up. He already had the inherent quick reflexes and physical skill. We saw it with the knife throwing, with the juggling, with kind of some of the acrobatic things he did. And then we saw it with his quarterstaff work. And now, like you've talked about, there's a reason that fighters train hours a day. And, some of that training is just doing the same technique a dozen times or more over and over. Because when you are in a fight, you don't want to have to think too much. You have to react. He charges this Murdral because he knows the only way to kill it, because it's supernaturally powerful, is all out attack. Do not give it an opening or it will smother you. And he's got those memories to add on top of the physical skills he already had. And I think that was a big reason Jordan gave us those earlier perspectives that when we talked about them, when we saw them, that to Matt, he has to think to realize these are other people's memories, because reflexively, they're like his own. They're every bit as much as his memories of watching his dad trade horses.
So Coach Smith, Oklahoma State wrestling coach, right? He talks about the time he fell off a deer blind and his wrestling training came through, and he did a hip heist and he flipped around and landed on his hands and feet instead of on his back over a stump. So it was the fact that he had basically the fact that you're falling backwards you automatically do something.
Mhm.
And so he was falling backwards and he did this thing, and otherwise he would have broke his back.
Yeah. And this is, do you know when that happened? Because he hasn't, I mean, I'm sure he probably still does because we've seen him walking around Stillwater. He's still in good shape. He still probably rolls around on the mats, but his wrestling career was like 3 decades ago, so
Yeah, the video I'm thinking of is, I think, 2005. He
okay.
recorded, and I need to take a break real quick.
Okay. All right. More hiccuping, moving on. I don't want to get us too sidetracked on sexy time with Sam, but I like that. I like the banter between him and Melindra about him being too short. And he is on the other side of the spine of the world, as he thinks in his own head. Anywhere else in the world, I'm taller than most men, if not by much, always, but he's still taller than average.
Well, you've met my friends around here.
Mm.
It's hard not to have a short man complex, even though I'm 3 inches taller than average, because they're all 3 inches taller than I am.
Because all of your friends are former athletes who are going to come from that tail end of the bell curve.
You met Big Ken. He played basketball in college, and it's
Yeah.
like, how do you not feel short next to this man? And so it's we take a group picture, and I'm the one that's like down here. It's like, oh, I'm taller than average. Damn it.
Mhm. I promise.
I promise.
But there is a component to that there is a reason that women are attracted to men who are taller than they are.
It depends on what kind of society you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you in more tournament kind of species of animal, the difference between male and female is big. But when you are in more of a kind of a, I guess, agrarian and monogamous, it kind of shortens the gap a little bit. So yeah, you can see this in humans and primates and all species of animal. The more egalitarian the species, the more close they are in size.
Right. But then when the fight's over and she comes back to their tent, he as she says that I saw you fighting the what is it that they call the murder night runners, I think
it's night runners.
Yeah. And you're you're more than tall enough. So there is still kind of a tournament type of thing there with the Aiel, because physical prowess is such a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really impressive to her.
Well, we can see it with what we talked about earlier with Bale and Mullane. The women are taller, and the women fight and all of these things. But then you look at the substantial men; they're extremely large and capable.
We get references to some, especially later on, that are.
Bale is basically the mountain with a brain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the so I was really close to David Robinson one time, because we went to the church that he goes to or went to. There was a thing there. I don't remember exactly why we went.
Right at 7 foot, right?
He was 7'2", I think.
7'2", okay.
Yeah. And I just happened to walk near him, and I felt like an ant. And some of the descriptions of some of the Aiel, I read those and I went, that guy's got to be like 7 feet tall with the way he's described. Because he's described.
I can tell you how tall they are.
In reference to Rand or Lan, who are both, quite tall.
Rand approximately 6'6". land
Yeah.
right at 6'6", 6'7", because they're comparable.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was even taller than I thought, in thinking, because that's quite large. I mean, for reference, I felt like one of my favorite pictures is the ALCS from several years ago, Yankees versus Astros, when Aaron Judge is on second and Altuve is standing next to him.
Okay, Bale is 6'10", 275.
Wow. Yeah.
Basically, he's about Aaron Judge's size.
Yeah, I was just talking about that earlier because I was talking to the wife about that, and
Which, let me see if I have it on my computer. I have.
he's
I
a
have- I
freaking
have a-
defensive end playing baseball, and he's really freaking good. It's not just that he's a giant; he's really freaking good.
Well, 6'10" would be tall for a defensive end because they have to be able to cut and turn.
I'm pretty sure Judge is 6'8", 275, something like that.
Oh crap! Oh, it's on this phone.
So
Yeah.
he's gigantic. While you're looking at that, here it is. Yeah, page 399. I saw you with the Night Runner, Matt Cawthon. That was one of the IO names for Madral. You are as tall as a man needs to be.
Yeah, because if he had been taller, he would have got his head cut off.
Yep. Yep. Because as soon as he walks out the tent, a blade goes right over his head and he has to duck and roll. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. But I love the way this ends is he's still Matt. So grinning, he slipped his arm around her waist. But those memories are also part of Matt now. So, but he could not get the attack out of his head. You have basically a supermodel. You basically have Giselle Bundchen standing next to you, naked. And so he's got his arm around her, heading back to the tent to do what you do with a naked supermodel. But he can't stop thinking about the attack because it doesn't make any tactical sense to him, because he doesn't have all the details, and that is bugging him, which I love.
Well, I mean, we've all been there. You have a puzzle in front of you, whether it's work, whether it's school or anything like that. But yet you're not going to say no.
Yeah.
And you're into it.
Did I mention that the last time we were talking about stuff like this is that Jimmy Carr, who's one of my favorite stand-up comedians, one of my favorite comedians, because he's so quick on his feet. Maybe I was talking about this with the wife. One of the things I love about Jimmy Carr is he's the only comedian I've ever seen who encourages audience participation, because he has he has the best put downs I've ever seen of hecklers. Sorry, sir. If you want my comeback, you'll have to scrape it off your mom's teeth.
Oh,
I spit coffee out on my computer when I heard that. It is so he has a bit about this in one of the he has some full stand-up specials on his YouTube page, and he has a bit about this, about excuses you've heard for not having sex, and he's going to help out the men in the audience to help them overcome these excuses. And then he, in the middle of the routine, he pauses and he says, "Now, women, I don't want you to think that I'm being sexist or I'm ignoring you. It's just that I'm not asking you for excuses because you've never had one." And then he goes through this list of all the horrible things that a guy could be going through. But if you go to your man and you say, "Hey, you want to go upstairs?" And yes, "Hey, the kids are out of town. We should." Yes. Who are these people?
okay. So on the right is me and my client Garrett. So he's
geez.
6'5", And so you see I come up to his eyeballs,
Uh-huh.
and he's standing next to Aaron Judge, his teammate, and he's next to his chin.
Oh my gosh.
So imagine me right here. I would be somewhere around here.
Hello, hello, hello.
So yes, there are massive people out there.
Yeah. Is Garrett still playing?
I believe so. He hurt his back, but COVID messed everything up with the minor leaguers. Because one of the things that happened over COVID was the MLB started doing this whole equity thing.
Oh, jeez.
But in a way, a sports specific equity thing from a money perspective. And they basically made every team go down to 4 minor league teams per major league team, where the Yankees had like 12.
I'm not sure if it's still on Netflix, but if it is, everyone should watch The Battered Bastards of Baseball. If you want a fun documentary about minor league baseball, which sounds weird, but it is fun. It is about the last independent minor league team that ever existed. And it's a load of fun. One of the reasons it's fun is because Kurt Russell's dad, who was a huge baseball lover, bought the team. He was the owner of the team. And Kurt Russell, who was a ridiculously good baseball player until he hurt himself and got more into acting, was on the team. And so he's in the documentary. It's a load of fun.
Okay, so I just looked up and he was playing as of August 8th, 2022. Okay. So he's still playing. I'll text him tomorrow. I'll give you all an update next time.
All right. Well, and we'll definitely have to rant about COVID now because you've got me grumbling about that. I like that it switches to Rand's perspective here. I've said it before. I kind of wish he would do this more of switching back and forth to, and he does this here, clearly because this is the main storyline and you've got 2 of the main characters here. So it's, the first part of the chapter, here's what this, pivotal important attack. So here's what Matt's doing. All right. Now here's what happened at the same time with Rand. So that's cool. And then we get some more Avienda stuff here where he's a jerk and he feels really bad about it after she saves his life. But then again, after he saves her life. And what I find most amusing, and you never actually see this, but I think you can infer it from everything we know about them, is Egwene is all upset because Rand yelled at her before he realized what she'd done. And I spoke too quickly. I was a jerk. I'm sorry. And so that's why Egwene rushes in to comfort her friend. But I think Avienda is more upset that she had to save Rand's life and that he had to save hers. I think the harsh language is wholly secondary in Avienda's mind. That this is someone I'm trying to stay away from. I'm trying not to get entangled with, personally or emotionally, and yet he just saved my life. And then I just saved his, as we were just comrades in battle together. That's got to be a big deal to Avienda, that, we just experienced this thing that I put high regard in together. But
well, I mean, we are entrenched in the comfort of Western society, and yet we would still develop a bond if we saved somebody's life or they saved ours. It's not just her culture that's I put this in high regard.
So it's doubly so, because you've got the inherent human feelings there, and then you pile on top of that the Giotto.
But that one would Giotto, that one would be equaled out though.
I'm not sure, because it wasn't just that, oh my gosh, there's a car behind you, let me fireball it. She was totally enthralled. She was helpless. She was as good as dead. If Rand hadn't acted, because it was already singing to her. It already had her.
Mm-hmm.
It just hadn't touched her yet to suck out her soul. The other important thing I think about this chapter before we get to the end of it here is that then he goes off to talk to Asmodean, because he is convinced that Samael did this, not just because the humans in the attack were shouting Samael and the golden bees, but all right, so page 405. So, a little over halfway down. Rand talking here. It was Samael who sent the attack tonight, the Trollocs and Dark Friends anyway. And it's not like Samael to throw men away, Asmodean said slowly, but he'll see 10,000 dead, or 10 times that, if it gains him what he thinks is worth the cost. Blah, blah, blah. It was him. He tried to bait me into attacking him once in the same way as Serendahar. Oh, light, the thought drifted across the surface of the void. I said me. He did not know where Serendahar had been or anything, but what he had said, the words had just come out. After a long silence, Asmodean said quietly, I never knew that. What I want to know is why. Rand chose his words carefully, hoping that they were all his. So we get more of that, why Rand is acting the way he's acting, why he's so freaked out about this, but also, Jordan is kind of explaining away some of the things that might be considered Deus Ex Machina, that no, Rand is the Dragon Reborn, and that has tangible effects, because he has, like Matt, he has these memories that are ingrained in him, and that gives him an advantage in certain ways. But he's also reminding us, hey, remember that little conspiracy that we had in the prologue? Yeah, hey, remember that, because that's going to matter here in a little bit.
And I finally can say this because it's not a spoiler, but Asmodean, Jordan did a good job of, you kind of start to like the guy. And I never understood, and even with the big cheat book, they don't do a good job of explaining what his motivations were for joining the dark. It was basically, oh, I can live forever. To be one of the most powerful 13 of the evil bad guys, that's not enough for me. And so Jordan does a great job of making you kind of like him, but he doesn't do a great job of making you understand why he went.
He's one of those Jamie Lannister type of characters. I think I've used this analogy before, that when I finally got around to watching Game of Thrones, I think it's somewhere around season 4, where I was texting a friend who had gotten me into it, and I was texting him, dang it, why is this stupid show making me like Jamie? Because it's around season 4, I think. So, somewhere around where he gets his hand cut off. Spoilers for the 12-year-old show if you haven't seen it. It's around that point where you go, oh crap, I'm liking this guy. And it's not just because of what he's going through. It's because of what he's doing. It's because of who he's becoming. And then we'll just pretend
when
that the
he's
last
training
couple of
with
seasons never
Braun
happened.
is when you really start to like him. Which you start to like Braun, and then you don't.
You stop liking a lot of them around season 7, and definitely by season 8, but we'll move on. Okay. All right, so chapter 23. Let's see if we can get through all these. All right, so we get a Egwene perspective here in chapter 23. Who is this? 23, 24, and 25 are all Egwene. But 23 is a big chunk of Rand. because she's watching him and we're getting what he does from her perspective and what she thinks about it. Cerelia is awesome.
Oh yeah.
She's such a fun character, and this is something that should jump out, and Egwene doesn't even realize it until later when she brings it up. So, well, let's get there. So he's
Well, I wanted to bring up something because I was looking at the they were trading off and everything, and there's a big thing with the movement of the people and the Aiel. Of course, they don't ride horses, and we actually have good data from tests that humans outpace animals in endurance. And 100-mile, I think 100 miles kind of like the big benchmark where a human can outpace a horse. And I think people lose track of that just because horses are so much faster and we've used them for vehicles for so long. But even the long distance horse messengers and stuff would switch horses as they went. So this is not something new. This is not something exotic. Humans can outpace almost any animal on this planet.
Yes, it's done to make the Aiel seem like Superman, but they only are in comparison to the men of the West, who are more European, who have come to rely more on machines and animals.
Well, and it's also about pacing too, because if you stay in zone 2, you can go day in and day out. Zone 2 for middle-aged person would be about 120 beats per minute, a heart rate. You can just keep going, and people don't understand their capacity, and that's Western society because we don't have to test it.
I've mentioned it before, and I'm drawing a blank on the name. It was a Nova show about early man, the evolution of early man, and they send a crew out with bush people in Africa who still live this way, and the way they take down a prey is to make it have heat stroke.
They wear it out. They basically
they
get it running until it dies of exhaustion.
they are good trackers, so they can keep following this same animal, and they keep on at a steady pace, and this thing will sprint and it'll be half a mile in front of them, but they keep coming, so it has a little bit of time to rest and recover, which is what animals do. It sprints away. All right, I'm away, I'm safe, let me hunker down in this bush to cool down and get my heart rate down and recover my energy. But here come the hunters, and then it has to sprint away again. And I can't remember how long, but it's hours that these bush people keep after this impala.
Well,
or
our primitive ancestors would be days. We would get a large prey going and just keep basically grinding until it passed out. And then we'd walk up and slit its throat and cut it up.
Yeah. The impressive thing about the Aiel is that it's all of them who are like this. It's not like just the hunters, just the warriors. It's the only reason the guy Shane are struggling, it's not because they're servants, it's because they're the ones pulling the animals, and the animals are struggling. Yeah, it's a good point. Even more so than what I was going to point out, which is what, Rand being the hard leader here. The other thing that's interesting, but I'm not going to say why, is what Cerelia says here on
Page.
Where is it? Well, first, when she first sneaks up on Egwene and Avienda, she gives them a good talking to about girls knowing their place. And you when I say jump, you say how high. Okay, so 414. Oh, wait, no, this is where she's talking. First, she talks to Avienda about the regard gift. I've heard he gave you a bunch of rubies and moonstones. Ah, crap. Avienda jumped as if a mouse had run up her leg. Well, she probably would not, but it was the way Wayne would have jumped in that circumstance. Thael explained about Layman's sword and the scabbard so hastily that her words tripped over one another. Cerelia shifted her shawl, muttering about girls touching swords, even wrapped in blankets, and about having a sharp word with young buyer,
who's very white in the hair,
who is very white in the hair and wrinkled. Exactly.
And a channeler, so very white in the hair as a channeler.
And a channeler. Yep.
Is super old. No. Is Buyer the one that can't channel, but she's a dreamer?
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Okay. So yeah. Okay. So I stand corrected in my own correction of myself.
But she is definitely a grandmother, an old woman. All right. All right.
So yeah, that was the big thing, because she can't channel and she can dream. Was there's something else to it? Yeah,
exactly.
Maybe she's a wolf brother.
All right,
she doesn't know it because there's no wolves out in the waste.
So here's the interesting bit that takes Egwene a little bit to figure out. We can talk about more when she gets there. All right. For a moment, she eyed Avienda up and down. I will have Farron look at you. His great father is my sister's son. Now, I don't think we've seen those terms explicitly before, but it's pretty easy to figure out. Great father would almost certainly be grandfather, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sister son, well, who is your sister's son? That would be your nephew. This guy's grandfather is her nephew. How old does that make Cerelia?
Which is funny because they talk about age and your strength and the power, but Cerelia is described as not having been
weak.
Very weak, very, very weak.
Yeah, you see that later, that she can barely make a flame out of nothing.
They make the comment she would have been cast out as an accepted or something like that. Yeah,
she either would have ended as an accepted or not even be allowed to take the accepted test. Yeah, she's somewhere in that range. She's very weak. But that's kind of one of those things that this is why the series is so infinitely rereadable, because you find nuggets like this where you go, oh, this occurs way before we start talking about age and channelers. But here's a big honking clue. Right. And then I love the first before Cerelia leaves, you young Aes Sedai, you know the Karakarn well. It is said, will he do as he has threatened, hang even a clan chief? I think maybe that he will. More quickly, Egwene added, but I am sure he can be brought around to see reason. Cerelia glanced at her in surprise, then turned to gaze on the chiefs around Rand's horse that should have knocked the lot of them flat. You mistake me. He must show the mangy pack of wolves that he is the chief wolf. A chief must be harder than other men, young Aes Sedai, and the Karakarn harder than other chiefs. The idea of Rand being hard is interesting. I'm not going to say why, but just if this is your first read through, just keep that in mind, because this is one of those fun little nuggets that Jordan is planting that just kind of ties into the web he reads. And I assume you know what I'm talking about, something that happens with Cerelia later.
Well, and not only that, but this is where, the series would have ended 6 or 7 books earlier if Perrin had been here, because Perrin's the blacksmith. And he understands the difference between hard and just the right hard.
And you see that at the very end, very, very end, the last book, when all these people come together because Rand has it in mind. He is going to do this thing. and then it all kind of blows up. It doesn't work exactly like Rand was thinking. And Perrin is the one who speaks up and says, well, now, hey, wait a minute. What if we tweak things slightly this way? Whereas Rand is kind of is stiffening his back and being, damn it, how dare you people reject this thing that I have said I want, which is a good thing. And it was a good thing, certainly from his perspective, even objectively. But these other people have their own perspectives. They have their own, thoughts, and they are also pretty legitimate. And it's Perrin who kind of holds everything together by saying, wait a minute, let's think this through.
Which is why Matt is the right person to have around here for the story, because he's like, yeah, do what you do, just leave me out of it.
I'm just trying not to get killed while I bang this blonde supermodel. Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Heidi
Klum, but 4 inches taller, basically.
That's why I said Gisele Bündchen, because I think she's taller than Tom Brady.
Yeah,
seeing pictures of them
blonde
together, it's hard to tell, because she's always wearing big heels. But I think she might be taller than Tom Brady. Anyway, so all right, so page 415, after Cerelia leaves. Who is this Farron? Egwene asked. I've never heard you speak of him. What does he look like? Frowning at Cerelia's back, more than half hidden by the women clustered around her, Aviendha spoke absently. He looks much like Ruark, only younger, taller, and more handsome, with much redder hair. For over a year, he has been trying to attract Anila's interest, but I think she will teach him to sing before she gives up the spear. And I don't understand. Do you mean to share him with Anila? It still felt odd speaking so casually of that. Aviendha stumbled again and stared at her. Share him? I want no part of him. His face is beautiful, but he laughs like a braying mule and picks at his ears. So I love the contrast there after, Matt and his, I can't get this puzzle out of my head, but I'm going to ignore it for now because blonde supermodel naked on my arm. And Farron is, oh yeah, he's like Ruark, only taller and more handsome. But he has these other qualities that a guy wouldn't care about. I don't care if your laugh is annoying and you pick your nose. You're hot. Let's do it.
Yeah, she looked like 4 inches taller Heidi Klum. She could laugh like, and we would be like, just don't tell a joke and I'm good.
Yep.
That wasn't braying like a mule. That was laughing like a sandman, I guess. But
and Aviendha's response helps set the stage for who Cerelia is, and we'll see more of her later. Of Egwene, if she thought I was trying to balk in this, she would make the bridal wreath herself and drag both Farron and me by the neck to be wed. Have you ever seen anyone say no to Cerelia? Could you? And Egwene opened her mouth to say something, but then realized it would be a lie because no, she couldn't say no either. And this is one of the things that jumps out at me in these couple of chapters with Egwene that I noticed, because we've been talking about her because you and Scott hate her, and I'm trying to kind of defend her.
I don't hate her. I just dislike her.
Or at least defend her.
Wouldn't kick her out of bed for eating crackers, but
yeah. So that you get a little bit of it here in this chapter, and then in the next chapter, where she's going into the world of dreams to meet with Nynaeve, and Elaine shows up, and so but before she goes in, she's thinking about stuff, and you really get and I don't know if I've noticed this before until I was going back through it earlier today, that one of the things she's thinking is why she's doing what she's doing. And we talked about this last time with her and criticizing the way she treats Nynaeve, knowing that what she's doing is wrong. which is, a pretty bad thing to do. It's one thing to do something wrong. It's another thing to consciously think about that this is wrong while you're doing it. And this is with someone who has been a very close friend for a very long time. And she's treating her poorly. But you kind of get more of the perspective of why here, where basically she's trying to prove that she's as strong as these other strong women. That's why she's doing what she's doing. That's why she's acting like she's acting. She's got Nynaeve, who was kind of one of the bosses of her village. She was basically apprenticed to her, not formally yet, but talking about being formally apprenticed to her. So she would have been her formal boss and teacher. She's also older. And then she's got this other friend who's a freaking princess and technically her princess, because technically the Two Rivers is a part of Andor.
But don't tell Perrin.
But don't tell Perrin.
Yeah.
Nynaeve, who's stronger than her in the power. And then you've got these wise ones who have all of these years of experience, all of these years of kind of running things, and they have all of this experience in the world of dreams that she's trying to learn. And there's kind of an inferiority complex overcompensation that's going on with Egwene that I don't think she ever fully realizes, which was kind of one of your points when we were talking about her earlier, is that one of the problems with her arc is that she never really gets her comeuppance. That even though bad things happen to her, she doesn't really realize, oh, I was acting like a jerk.
And let's use modern terminology. She has an inferiority complex from a jealousy standpoint, but she never has imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is where you get into a position that you earned, but you feel like you don't belong. Whereas she puts herself in situations she hasn't earned because she thinks she should have it.
That's a good point, except that I wouldn't necessarily say she's jealous of these other women that she's trying to prove herself to. I think she's just so driven to show that I am also awesome. I am also strong.
So when we look at the characters, we look at Matt. So when he's thrust into a situation, he has imposter syndrome because he's like, I don't belong here, but I'm trying to survive.
We are quite literally going to see exactly that in the next time we talk about this.
Rand does that to some degree. Nynaeve does that to some degree because you don't see it with her actions, but you see it with her thoughts because we get it from her perspective. Elaine even does it because she's trained to be a queen, but she doesn't feel like she could be the queen yet. Who else is a major character we see this from?
Perrin,
big time.
Perrin hates being a noble. He hates people deferring to him because as far as he's concerned, he's just talking common sense. He's not doing anything special.
Well, we'll go down the Perrin arc. Fail, Zareen. When we get into her own thoughts, we see it a lot. Moiraine, even to some degree. So you see this normal human emotion from these people, but from Egwene, you see the opposite. So I recommend to anybody in the audience who's read through all the books and knows what we're talking about and has time to read other things, read Machiavelli's The Prince. And you'll see a lot of this kind of mentality where I belong here. I just have to make the world fit around me. And she's the most Machiavellian character in the whole series, other than the bad baddies, realistically.
Yeah, it's just in her defense, I feel anyway, that she's not doing it on purpose. Well, she's doing it on purpose, but she's not doing it with malintent.
Well,
She's
even
doing it-
Machiavellian people don't do it on purpose. Back to our free will discussion.
Not necessarily. Well, not
it's
necessarily
it's
on
the way their
purpose.
mind's made, you know.
It's yeah. By that I mean there are people who, and we've talked about this kind of in our other stuff and a little bit here, is that you have some pretty warped personalities in politicians and CEOs because it's hard to achieve that level if you aren't to some degree a narcissistic sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have some of those elements if you want to achieve that level in those fields. But there are some people who achieve high levels of success just doing what they think is right, not doing it because, by golly, I want to be in charge. By golly, I want to be the leader. I want to achieve the success. I want to be the one who makes the decisions. And I don't think Egwene is that type of person. She's the type of person who has a lot of those personality traits, but she's not driven in the same way. And I think that makes a difference, that she is doing some of the things, some of those same things that are flawed character traits, but
Well,
she's doing it because she thinks it's the right thing to do.
She's chapter 2 of Sal Alinsky's Ends Justify the Means. There, he has a list of rules of what means are necessary for what ends and what's acceptable, and she very much follows that playbook.
Yeah, and we get a lot of that here in both of these chapters here, where she's with the wise one, she's meeting with Elaine, she's thinking about all these things, and then the next chapter 25, is when Elaine gets her subtle message and meets her in the White Tower, where they can have a private talk. And so it is a lot of that same thing. And she's not necessarily treating Nynaeve different, or Elaine differently than she did Nynaeve. It's just that the results of her attitude were different with Nynaeve because Elaine is a much different personality.
Mm-hmm.
Elaine is not as combative. She's naturally more diplomatic and political.
So hold that thought for a second. With Egwene, this is, I think, the big misunderstanding is I can respect somebody without liking them. And her methods work for her. And in the context, of course, we're talking about a fictional character, like they were a real person, but they work for her and they work in the context. But I don't like it.
A real life example of that for me is, I respect Zack Snyder as a filmmaker. I don't like him because of a lot of the things he's done. I respect what he has tried to do, but I don't like his work because I don't think he's achieved those things that he was trying to do. Except in 300. I think that one worked.
300 worked, but it was a certain style.
Exactly.
It was a very specific style.
You know, what he was trying to do, like, you'll get all these videos defending Snyder and the Snyderverse, the DC Snyderverse, because you know, this theme and that theme and this, you know, meta thing. And okay, well, yes, I get that that's what he was trying to do. I just don't think it worked. I don't think it came across that way, but I can still respect him as a creator.
Well, let's go in our industry.
He's very good.
I can respect Mark Ripito for starting Strength and his thoughts in that arena.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. Yeah, that's a good one.
But I met the man and I've seen his other work and I can't stand the man. He's a dickhead in every sense of the word. And but he does have good work. So I can respect that work without liking the dude.
Yeah, I use his teaching technique for deadlift 101. I use his steps for teaching the deadlift. That's how I teach people to do the deadlift. But there's a lot of other stuff that I don't teach,
Mhm.
that come from him. Yeah, that's a good one. All right, so finishing up real quick, unless you have any other thoughts. So the end of this chapter 25, when she goes snooping around in the White Tower.
By the
and
way,
this
it's not a 40-minute limit because we're at 45 on this.
okay. So I don't know why it
recording.
crashed. I don't know
Yeah.
why it crashed earlier. But this is another one of those. I don't want to talk about why, and it's one of those things I didn't notice until a reread. But the chapter ends with Egwene snooping around in the White Tower, and then all of a sudden, weird things start happening in the world of dreams. And it turns out, after she flees the world of dreams, and it switches to a different perspective, and it's Moghedian. And Moghedian was able to manipulate the world of dreams around Egwene.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that she's got a good amount of control, that she is something of a savant when it comes to dreaming.
Yeah, but when you don't know what you're trying to control,
Exactly.
it's a different beast.
Exactly. But the big thing is holy crap, another dreamer we've kind of only seen hints of this before. We haven't really seen how
Isam, we saw a lot with that.
But Moghedian is very skilled and very subtle at what she's doing to Egwene, that Egwene never even suspects that something funky is going on here. She thinks this is all from her subconscious.
Well,
this is her losing control.
I almost brought up an analogy from Marvel. She's like the Black Widow. As the Black Widow should be, not as the man in a female body that Marvel made her in the movies.
It's as I pointed out, to me, the best parts of her character and some of the best scenes in the whole movie are in the Avengers in her interrogation scenes.
Yeah, in description, she's a Black Widow, because those that know what a Black Widow is, that's exactly how the spider is described.
Yeah.
It's something you don't know is there until you're bit. I've actually been bit by a Black Widow before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you remember when we were burning brush at the Lavernia house and a Black Widow egg sac broke? That was one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen. It was like something out of a nightmare, as 1,000 little tiny Black Widows started swarming all over the place. And we said, kill it with fire. And we did. We killed it with fire.
I was chucking logs that I had cut before, and something bit me on the hand. And I was like, that kind of hurt. And then my tongue went numb and all these things. And I took that log and I turned it over, and there was a Black Widow inside. And I was like, blah, blah,
did you have to get treated or?
No, it would that's the extent of it. Kind of a little like tingling all over. But I mean, I'm about 100 pounds too heavy for that thing to kill me. So,
yeah. Well, it's still a very strong bite, and people even adults have to be treated for it often. My dad didn't. He's gotten bit by one, and he didn't have to be treated for it.
Yeah, it's a nervous system reaction, but it was it comes in. It happens. Your tongue just like goes, like you just kind of.
Yeah, at least it's not necrotic like a snake bite, because
no. That's a different kind of poison. Yeah,
so that
goes through your lymph nodes, not your nervous system.
Yeah, that's why I don't worry about them as much as snakes. But that's why snakes kind of freak me out. Stupid blood snakes. Stupid eye eel. Anyway, but that's
you're gonna come. You gotta come work at my mom's property with me when we can dodge copperheads while we're cutting down.
All right, but I'm bringing Paws double barrel.
Oh, I wear gaiters and everything. So,
yeah, we had some good cats the first time we lived in Lavernia, and they would leave them on the front porch.
Well, Scott's East Texas, so he's got plenty of cottonmouths.
No.
Yeah, plenty of cottonmouths. He probably got timber rattlers.
I've heard I've had too many family members talk to me about moccasins who were so aggressive they chased them.
Well, the great thing, so for those in the audience that don't know where we're from, we met each other in a place called Lavernia, Texas.
Oh.
So for the Boston fans out there, that's about 10 miles from China Grove. But it's which is southeast of San Antonio. I like to think of it as the Australia of Texas, because you got rattlesnakes, you've got copperheads, you've got cottonmouths, you've got coral snakes. So all 4 deadly snakes of the United States are in one area. And you've got brown recluse spiders, you've got black widows, you've got poisonous centipedes, you've got scorpions.
Oh, the scorpions.
Oh, I had one in my pants one time. I put them
no.
on and it hit me like a half inch from my left nut 6 times. Pop, 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 pop. Oh, that was painful. What else we got there? Those are the main ones.
Well, and then just lots of cactus, so you got to watch out for that.
You got bull nettle, you got poison oak, you got poison ivy. There's another little nettle that's like really tiny, and it's got these little rigid leaves, and I don't know what the name of it is, but you grab that, and you're basically raw for a week or so. Yeah, so I like to call it the Australia of Texas, because we got all of that in one little spot.
Yeah.
You know.
All right. Well, that's all I got on those chapters. We've gone longer than we usually do, but I was trying to get through all this. Do you have spoiler things you want to talk about?
Oh shit! Did we have spoilers? Okay, spoiler alert for everybody out there. If we do talk about it, we talked about Robin a little bit.
Yeah, this is our spoiler section. I didn't have a ton of spoiler thing. I know we mentioned quite a few things, but they're really things that I don't think we need to go into detail about until we actually get there. There's a lot of the stuff that we talked about that's going to come up and pay off at the end of the book, with the fight with Robin, with Moghedian and what happens to him, with World of Dream stuff and all that stuff. But we can go into that much more when it happens. There wasn't a ton of stuff that's, down the road that I think we need to go into more.
Yeah, and maybe that's why Fires of Heaven was so blah. Because it was all in the moment stuff.
That's a good point.
There was very little setup.
That's a good point. It actually is a pretty self-contained book, which typically.
Okay, so spoiler alert. We're going to talk about Robin for a second. So spoiler alert, everything goes around Couladin and Robin.
Mm-hmm.
And Couladin dies, and Robin gets basically obliterated from the pattern.
I had never really thought about that before, but it's like a movie that's a part of the series, but you can watch it on its own. That I'm trying to think of something that's set up.
So the stuff we already talked about with Egwene and with Rand hardening and.
Yeah, but that's all character stuff that's building on top of itself, that's going to be up throughout the whole series thing, because these are main characters. But as far as the events of the book go, the prologue sets up the fight with Robin at the end. Whereas so often the prologues set up something that's going to happen books down the road. And I hadn't really thought about that this book is kind of bookended. You've got the prologue that's setting up this Forsaken conspiracy against Rand, and then it's going to kind of pay off at the end of the book with the fight against Robin. And you've got the setup with Couladin early in the book when they start moving towards the Zhengai Pass.
Well, and we complain about Perrin. So you complain about Perrin not being in this book.
Mm-hmm.
You've got everything setting up through book 4, and then you've got everything from 6 through whatever, and 5 is like, well, we need Rand to be here for all this to work, so we're just going to get everything over there. and then we start the story again. Is kind of how it works. Which realistically, from the description of Robin in the cheat book here, why was Robin not more of an impact to this whole thing? He is like the man.
Well, that is something that does kind of get set up and carry on, which is the aftermath, the results of what Robin does to Andor. That is something that will have long-lasting consequences, but it is kind of a down the road thing. As far as this book is concerned, it's all kind of wrapped up, which rarely happens here.
Well, again, we're in spoilers because when we see Osengar and Erengar come through, yeah, Bethamel being Osen, which was the girl, Erengar.
I can't remember.
Yeah, Erengar is the girl. Because Osengar is, again, we're in spoilers. If you're still here, we've said it many times. Osengar is Dashiva, and Erengar is Halima.
I think she shows up at the end of this book, doesn't she?
Because
Because that is, again, one of those things that Shawan's storyline kind of starts at the beginning, and it kind of sort of gets wrapped up because we're about to get to Salidar. Salidara is the next chapter that we're going to do.
Yeah. Okay. So, but here's my point. Bethamel being Erengar, because of his lascivious nature, is the joke, right? But we don't know about his lascivious nature, except for a piece of one scene where he's kind of like at one of the girls. Yeah. Whereas Robin being Erengar we would have known.
That's a good point.
We would have known because of a whole book of him manipulating women.
Lots of women. Yeah.
Lots of women. And then other people's thoughts of him manipulating women.
That was something we probably could have gone down a long side rant of Sexy Time with Sam of when Lenny is talking to Morgase and Morgase goes, "Wait, what do you mean all the others?" And Lenny said, "It's the kind of thing a woman, you can't tell someone because she won't believe it until she gets to the conclusion herself." And yep,
I can give you many examples from,
and that's not just a woman thing, because we've all Saving Silverman is a hilarious movie, except that I saw it when I was going through that with a friend of mine.
Oh no, go back to Euro Trip. Scotty doesn't know.
Yep, the guys will do the same thing. They just do it differently.
Yeah,
they don't realize that she is got her hooks in you and is treating you wrong until they see it themselves.
And even when they see it themselves, they probably need to see it multiple times.
Yeah,
and
because we don't care that you laugh like a braying mule and pick your nose. You're a supermodel, so let's go.
Yeah, but yeah, there are holes in the setup, because I know about Bethamel and his nature, and then the joke of him being Erengar, because I read the back source material. I went through all the threads. I did all of that.
We read the big white book when it came out, even though the art is horrible.
But if you're an author, you need it to stand alone to some degree, and you don't get that from the actual book. Whereas
I never really thought about that before, and now it annoys me. That would have been great. That would have been perfect.
Robin being Halima would have been exceptionally better.
And also hilarious, because we, the reader, would have gotten the poetic justice. We don't really get it. We get it, it is one of the few instances where Jordan is telling and not showing. Because
and he could have fixed it by having the other ones think about Bethamel or even Agenor, because unless you read the source material, you don't know Agenor created the Trollocs.
There are just the tiniest of snippets in the books.
Tiniest of snippets. Yeah, you don't know he created the Trollocs in the Madral. So there's these things that you don't know unless you read the source material, which really should have been more clear in the books, I think.
Wait, have we seen them? No, I think that's the prologue of Lord of Chaos, isn't it? Have we seen them reincarnated yet? I
Not
can't
yet.
remember where that
Not
scene
no,
is.
definitely not yet. But I don't know
Okay, so
where
I
they
was
come
wrong.
out.
Halima
Yeah.
shows up in the next book in Celadar. Okay. Yeah. Because she shows up shortly before Matt gets there, so she's gonna show up in the next book.
And I already have a picture of her in my head, so they better cast her well if they play her in the. She's like a Demi Moore to me.
I was gonna say Selma Hayek from Desperado, but that's just because she's
Ooh,
smoking
Salma
hot.
Hayek would have been good too.
Yeah.
Ooh, Demi Moore or Salma Hayek. Those are both good choices.
Demi Moore is taller, and I think the way she's described, she's taller.
Well,
'cause
and
she's
I'm
more
thinking G.I.
model-like,
Jane
but-
too, because remember, she was slightly manly in her feminine.
Mhm,
know, and that's what kind of, she can pull off the G.I. Jane. So it was like, oh.
All right. Well, I'm old and I'm in Florida, so it's way past my bedtime. I think Matlock is probably on. It's probably on a loop here because it's Florida. But
Yeah, Wapner's at 8. Wapner's at 8.
oh
Yeah.
geez, I was because I'm in Florida and I didn't have anything to do this morning. I was watching TV Land, and frickin' TV Land has a trigger warning before Bonanza now, and it triggered me.
Okay, we're doing COVID next, right?
Speaking of triggers, yeah.
I want to talk COVID. I want to talk cholesterol. What else do you want to talk?
You bring up cholesterol. That reminds me that something I've been meaning to bring up is that one of our fitness things, when we talk about fitness stuff, we should start trying to we've kind of touched on it, but I think we should really drill down on specific fitness myths and junk science, snake oil. And what made me think of this is the radio station I usually listen to has started advertising this new high-tech, guaranteed to lose 2 inches off your first visit using special light.
Oh, but I'm a dude. I don't want to lose 2 inches. I want to gain 2 inches.
Maybe we can talk about that at some point too, but no. So you get special light, and I've heard also of like using ultrasound to break up fat cells. And I just thought
it actually works.
Geez. With a caveat, yes.
Well, you can't drink because your liver has to take care of the fat, but
there are parameters. But this one really made me go nuts because wait a minute, you're using a special light to but the thing about it is they're always very careful in how they phrase things so that technically they're not lying.
Yeah, it's the lipo. Well, I'm going to call it the lipo industry. So whether it's liposuction, lipodissolve,
non-surgical, non-invasive.
Yeah. Well, liposuction is surgical and invasive, but they all have caveats to them.
Yeah.
And they all have pitfalls as well. They all have benefits also.
Yeah.
At a cost.
Yep.
Or at a consideration. Like you said, the ultrasound. Yeah, it works to some degree, not as much as they tout, but it does work to some degree. But you need your liver 100% available to process it, or else it just goes back to where it came from. So you can't have a drink. You can't eat fruit because fructose is processed in the liver. A lot of things that go into it, but yeah, I wanted to go into cholesterol because it kind of feeds into our COVID talk, because the NIH and the CDC have changed their tone in the last 4 years on it. And it all kind of feeds into the we need to eat bugs instead of beef thing.
Oh, good Lord. All right. I am gonna go find myself a bacon cheeseburger, even though it's the middle of the night. because on general principle. And then we will see y'all next time to do some non-Wheel of Time talk. And then when we get back to Wheel of Time, we'll get into, I think it's Swan and the girls is the big chunk of what's next before we get back to Rand and Matt.
Okay, so if you see this as a day after we did it, because I have to piece
Clip
it all together
Yeah.
and video editing, and it's already almost 10 o'clock here. So PM, not AM. So we'll see if I can get this out fully tomorrow. So it'll be Thursday when you see it.
All right. See y'all next time.
Later.